The Guardian Legend is a very unique game and obviously underrated. Even though it was featured in the top 10 games in Nintendo Power when it was first released, I feel like as though it didn't get enough attention, not to mention some of the mixed reviews it got. Anyways, this game is without doubt one of the most complex games ever made. It takes elements from games like Legend of Zelda, 1942, Blaster Master, and Metroid, and uses them to make something completely different. I remember having this game as a kid and I found it very fascinating, aside from Shatterhand and Batman. To describe this game in a more expanded way would be like trying to explain the backstory and making of Citizen Kane in one sitting, but it won't be that hard to talk about here. It's not like I'll be doing a complete walkthrough because the game is pretty long to cover anyways, so I'll do it in a way you'll understand. In the game, you take control of Miria, the female guardian of Earth, who infiltrates Naju, an unknown planet-like object that was sent by aliens to collide with Earth, and it's up to Miria to destroy it by activating the safety devices to initiate its self-destruction. Along the way, you'll encounter creatures that will be a threat to you on ground and in the air, and as you can see, there are a shitload of them. The top-down perspective has you navigating the surface of Naju, known as the Labyrinth. You kill enemies and destroy these breakable blocks. Simple enough. You also come across warp panels that will take you to a different part of the planet or to different rooms. Some of these rooms will be those that provide you with a password to save your progress, some with corridors that can open up and take you to the flying portions of the game, but there's a lot of ground to cover here before we go flying. Some rooms will have these big blue-like ball creatures that can provide you with weapons and items to buy or give you a password. There's also rooms with hints that can help you break through limbo. These hints are provided by the sole survivor that lived long enough to create these messages for anyone to read. Some of these panels you can't access easily unless you have the corresponding key symbol matching that shown on the panels. During your expedition on foot, you start off with this blue beam that you can upgrade with experience and items as this game goes on. You can also achieve other weapons that can aid you in situations that calls for them. You can move around as you shoot, getting the shots on the enemies before they get to you, and if you hold the B button, the beam continues to fire rapidly, so that's another plus. The enemies aren't too bad at first, but as you keep going forward, they gain more strength and you best be sure to level up by the time you get to different areas on this planet. The one thing I hate about the enemies is how they appear when you enter a new area. You will have no idea where they'll appear, and when they do, you best get out of their way or you'll take damage. I find this kind of cheap, but at least they flicker for a brief moment to let you know they're coming. As for the environment on Naju, there's a lot of ground to cover and it feels like a never-ending chore to navigate your way through, but at least Compiler was gracious enough to give you a map that you can pull out by pressing the select button, along with viewing your status and weapons you have. There are a few problems I have with the map. For one thing, the environment for one area is huge. The map doesn't mark which way you can enter from. Maybe it would have been possible if they expanded the map a bit. Since each room is represented as a small white square, it doesn't show you what will be in that particular room. It only shows where you are with a blinking red light. Another downside is that there's no map present while you're playing, and you'll find yourself switching back and forth just to check where you are. The map is pretty reliable nonetheless, but maybe too reliable at times. Once in a while you'll enter an area that looks empty, going your merry way, and what the hell? What's going on? What's with the alarm? Why is the perimeter being sealed off? I can't get out! I can't get out! Oh my god, didn't expect that to happen. So yeah, when an alarm goes off in mostly empty rooms, blocks will appear to seal you in and face a mini-boss. Just be prepared for this to happen and do your best to take these monsters out and you're free, unless you manage to get out of there before you're sealed in. As for the other enemies, some of them can be very annoying and some of them seem like as though you can't destroy at all, like these hockey puck droids. And when there are rooms with a lot of these pucks, please be cautious, and every time you get hit, Miria will spin 360 degrees as her deflector shield goes off, and there is no grace period. So you want to take as little damage as possible, as it can get tiresome scouting the rooms looking for what health you can find. Once in a while when you destroy enemies, they'll reveal a block that you can shoot at that will reveal health icons and chips. If you die once, it's game over. Thankfully you are given a password system to continue where you saved with the last big blue beanie baby. But please tell me, why does a password have to be so friggin' long? Why not do it like Lil Samson or Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle? Is there any technical or logical reason for these long passwords? It can be very tedious writing down these passwords given to you and input them just to get back into the game, but that alone doesn't deter the game in any way. As I mentioned before, you can upgrade by earning experience from killing enemies and finding weapons or buying them, but you need power chips to purchase them, and the chips you need to find are represented as these red balls. You'll earn additional chips and increase your health gauge if you destroy certain enemies or bosses or find particular items, and even when you collect them, you can't stock on any more unless you upgrade with these red Beanie Baby icons. Also, some of the weapons you achieve along the way consume some of your chips, and you'll find yourself conserving as much as you can while keeping yourself from frittering them away. Not to mention staying alive at the same time, and when you get further into the game, you'll find yourself using these weapons more frequent than your beam, no matter how powerful it is. For the beam, it gets upgraded depending on how much chips you have, but every time you use chips for weapons and such, your beam downgrades and you have to replenish your chip total to get your strong beam back, which is a downside that I don't favor much. For the corridors, sometimes the hatches open up the moment you enter the room, but other times you have to complete a certain task to gain access, which is one of the vital reasons for these hint rooms. When you enter a corridor, you'll transform into a starfighter ship pretty similar to Transformers. Now onto the flying portions. For these parts, you'll get a familiar feeling to Galaga, but in this game it's very different. Your main objective in these portions is to go through and fight a swarm of enemies, and as you can see, they pour in fast. These areas will either move at a slow pace, normal pace, or ridiculously fast. For the first few flying portions, it's not too bad, but when you get to newer corridors, you best be fast and ready for what's to come, as these creatures will not let up. You're able to move freely with your ship in any direction facing forward. However, I strongly advise you not to always go to the top of the screen, because that's where almost all of the enemies will emerge from. Like the Labyrinth, you'll have your beam and weapons to use, and whenever you destroy enemies here, you'll occasionally get item boxes when you destroy about half a dozen or so. But you need to wait for these boxes to emerge, and if you're on a screen that's rushing you, you'll most likely miss it. After you reach a certain point, the same alarm for upcoming mini-bosses will come on and alert you about an upcoming boss, and as you can see from these bosses, they're friggin' big. Some of these bosses are not too hard once you know what to do, but some of them can be a fucking pain in the ass, and when you get to advanced corridors, don't expect every boss to be the same. These are moments why you need to conserve as much ammunition for your weapons as possible to take these freaks out fast. Some of them you can take out easily with your regular beam, but some of them will require more than that. Some of the bosses you faced previously will reappear, but as a different color, and with that, they won't fight the same way they did before. And not all of these bosses are pushovers, especially the final boss. Oh my god! Once you've defeated a boss, you're able to escape the corridor, and sometimes you'll gain a key symbol for panels to access new territory. Both of these segments are very good and fun, but the problem with the Labyrinth part is that the pacing can get very repetitive at times, and it will make you feel insipid going through the same areas just to get somewhere and back, even with the respawning enemies. Even this attribute doesn't slow you down from progressing. Hell, it didn't slow me down. If you can get through the repetitive navigation, bringing up the map over and over again, and a long password, you'll find this game rather addictive. The graphics are very nice and appealing. The sprites in Miria's character and her ship looks nifty, and the enemies are very creative along with the bosses. The landscape in the Labyrinth areas on Naju is all great, but the one downside is that the landscape can get repetitive, but it's not that bad in this case. They actually bother to let you know what blocks are solid by making them different colors, but just keep in mind that the blue and yellow blocks are breakable. The layout in the corridors are good as well, but it almost feels like as though you're on a treadmill, since the layout below you seems to loop at times, and the screen can move so fast that you can barely take note of the ground below. There are enemies stationed within the background to get a jump on you, like these eyeballs in the holes, or the skulls that are stationed on the ground. The only negative aspect about the sprites is that they can flicker, particularly when there's an overwhelmingly amount of enemies on the screen, and it makes them look partially invisible, and sometimes the sprites flicker anyways when there's not a lot of enemies crowding around, and you'd be amazed of how big these enemies can be, or how they can appear. The graphics as a whole are splendid nonetheless, and pretty freaky. The controls are very fluent. It's like any typical top-down gameplay like Zelda. The B button lets you shoot your beam, while the A button lets you fire out what weapons you have equipped. To save your game, it's the same button, but you have to be unequipped to save. You move freely within the vicinity of each area, and Miria walks pretty fast to evade enemies or get a good distance from them. You can shoot rapidly, but the beam can take a very brief pause before shooting another set. The controls in the flying portions are the same as on ground. You can use the select button to choose between weapons, likewise on foot. However, I wish they let you switch between these weapons on the fly or turn them off easily without heading to your inventory, but I guess that wouldn't have been possible with the limited buttons on the controller. Regardless, the controls are near perfection. The difficulty of this game starts out pretty easy as you begin your first flying portion and first get on ground, but as you advance to new areas and corridors, you better be upgraded with experience, otherwise you're not going to last long. There are a few enemies when you first begin, but as you go on, they start hunting in groups and swarms, and their strengths are off the charts that it will take you a lot of hits from your beam to kill them if you decide not to use your other weapons, which I strongly suggest you do, because these monsters are relentless. The hints that are given by the Anonymous may seem confusing at first with the puzzles presented, but once you've broken through that barrier, you'll have no problem advancing. Also, if you don't play it logically and waste all of your chips, you will not be able to use any of your special weapons, not to mention that the lack of substantial amount of chips downgrades your beam. If you manage to beat the game, you will be given a special code, TGL, which has you going through all of the shooting areas only, and this mode seems a bit harder. The game is pretty challenging, but it shouldn't be heavily frustrating. There's also a secret edition hack of this game that presents a new challenge to those that have conquered the original. I hope to cover it, but I just need to figure out how to play it on FCEUX since it's an IPS file and not an NES file. I'm open to any helpful suggestions that can solve this tedious problem. The music is very atmospheric and catchy. They're all very melodious and creative. There's a different piece of music for each area so it won't feel repetitive, but a few of these tunes are reused, but that's not a big deal. The boss themes are upbeat and keeps the momentum of the fight from getting boring. The sound effects are neat and cool too. It may get a bit annoying hearing the shooting sounds of the beams since you tend to shoot a lot, but at least it's not so bad. Even with a few setbacks involving the gameplay, The Guardian Legend is an extraordinary game and it has very good replay value. The story is original, the appearance is jaw-dropping, the controls are sheer perfection, and the fun factor is there, even though it can get a bit tedious at times. With a game this incredible, it makes you wonder why this has not been remade to be modernized. Well, its creator, Compile, closed its doors 10 years ago, and IRM for some reason have no plans of remaking the game, even though there's potential. I guess it's the same kind of bullshit similar to Capcom's claim that they will remake Resident Evil 2, if there's enough support. If it was up to me, remaking this game would be my top priority. Even if it turned out to be superior, it sure as hell wouldn't beat the charm and nostalgia of the original. The game nonetheless is still awesome, even with the potential remake. If you like Legend of Zelda and space shooters, you'll love this one. Thanks for watching. I'm Riley Sky. See you later. I know I'm several months late, but since it's still 2013, happy 25th birthday, Guardian Legend. What are you doing? Do not wait here. Then what am I doing here?